Hello and welcome to my channel and to my review of Dragon Age Veilguard. Now, if you've been following my channel at all, whether on social media or on YouTube, you will have seen me playing Veilguard, whether streaming it on Twitch or uploading the entire series onto YouTube. It's on my channel now, so you can go away and you can watch my entire playthrough if you wish, but now the time has come to review it. Apologies for the delay in this. I know this review is late, I'm behind on the curve, and that's for two reasons. One, I've had a very busy schedule, and unfortunately I can't dedicate all my time to content creation, no matter how much I would love to, so other things have stepped up. And number two, I really wanted to digest my thoughts, I wanted to go away, I didn't want to have recency bias, and I wanted to kind of be able to talk through everything in my head first before coming on here and talking to you about everything. So you're coming with a fully prepared Ewan. I'm ready, I'm locked in, and I'm ready to talk Dragon Age Veilguard. Firstly, I played the game on Xbox, so take that into consideration. If you're on any of the other platforms, my playthrough will not be the same as yours, so please bear that in mind. And this is only one man's opinion. For the record, I am not an expert on video games. I've played them all my life, but that does not make me in any way an expert. This is just my opinion and discussion, and it's more serving as a place for people to discuss and debate with. I want you guys to comment your thoughts, and if you disagree with me about something, that doesn't mean either of us are wrong. We just can talk about it. A lot of this is preference, but I am going to be talking about my own personal knowledge of story building and world building, and bringing that into this to kind of critique lovingly some of the things that I've seen in the game. But as I said, it is one man's opinion. But this opinion is coming from a fan of Dragon Age. I've played all three of the previous games, I've read all the books, all the comics, watched even the TV series and the movie. Terrible movie, but I've seen the movie, so I love Dragon Age, and I know Thedas. However, in my mind, nervousness was outweighing my excitement, especially with a few of the revelations that we're going to talk about later. And in my head, I was just thinking, I think this is going to be a great game, but the question is it going to be a great Dragon Age? And that is what I'm looking to answer in this video. So, like all good Dragon Ages, let's get started with the characters. So, I'm going to start by talking about the companions and romance. The game was all about the companions. They literally changed the name for it. BioWare themselves have set a very high bar for what the group needed to be through their casts in the previous games. And this is very much the Veilguard story, their journey. They had to be incredible for this game to excel, and they put a lot of marketing behind it. And for me, they slightly missed the mark, but got damn close to a bullseye. This group had a really interesting cast of morally good, and I can't stress this enough, morally good, everyone is good in this game, characters, and they had a lot of love to share, literally in some cases. But sometimes they did feel reasonably bland, and for me the worst offenders were Nev and Davrin. However, several of the companions were an absolute delight, reaching some of the top heights of Dragon Age lore and companions. And my key examples of that are Balara, my romance, Lucanus, and Emric, who were delivered an exceptional entry into this Dragon Age lore and to Thedas, and I hope that they come back in future installments if we're going to get them. Looks like we are. Again, we'll touch more on that later. They had really interesting stories, giant personalities, and were unique in their cultural view of Thedas. Like Emric was speaking from a Morn Watch perspective. He'd never really explored out of it. He was bringing that culture everywhere you go, and I thought that was a really cool way of exploring something that we'd never explored before. We'd heard of them, but to actually get to see them in that way was really exciting.
So why'd we bring that?
Oh, it's essential we have the Hand of Glory.
It is so hard not to make fun of something called a Hand of Glory.
What's so amusing about it?
Really? You don't, with the name? No? Never mind.
And I do have to give a special mention to Harding. I think they did make her return impactful, and she was a strong and fresh presence on the team. And I really did enjoy her persona, her silliness. She was a goofy character, and I liked that. And she's definitely going to be my second playthrough romance, so fair play. Speaking of romances, though, unfortunately I felt they were lacking in this game. There was about 19 minutes of romance content I believe I saw, and that's how I describe it, is just lacking. There are some nice moments, but they are very few and far between. And with Belara's romance, I was left underwhelmed, yet still really enjoyed her character, which was frustrating because then I wanted more of it.
Elgernon's taken Minrathis. The world could end tomorrow. You know what, though? That doesn't matter. Not right now. I want to live in this moment as long as I can.
Anything could happen. So let's hold on to joy while we can.
Malala ating mir usinira.
I also think we needed more dialogue and conversation, which is interesting because we've got these new conversation quests which have been brought in to help build those dynamics between your companions, and unfortunately we don't get much romance content in them, and they offer the perfect chance for that to be explored if that's what BioWare went with. So it feels a shame that they didn't choose to go down that route, considering they built the perfect function to do that, which hadn't always been in the previous Dragon Ages. So we're going to speak about the villains now, the antagonists of our story. They are just as important as the companions, if not more, because these are your motivation, these are who you're hunting. And the whole basis of the game, we've got to talk about the Elven Gods, the ancient Elven Gods, Gillenane and Elganon. Overall, I think they were fine. They weren't necessarily overly integrated into the story, which sounds weird because they are the entire focus of the plot, but them themselves making appearances. They're talked about a vast amount, but they aren't actually seen as present in the story beyond being that of a world-ending threat in a few missions, and we don't actually get many conversations or interactions with the characters. That being said, they do keep the stakes massively high throughout the entire game, and I did feel that sense of urgency that BioWare was trying to instill in us through all three acts, and on that point they really did deliver. When they were there as well, they were also offered unique perspectives and really good dialogue. Elganon especially was incredibly sinister, and his voice was the perfect villain voice. I think I remember saying in the game as we were going on the final mission, I was like,
Your vision, your loyalty will be rewarded.
I mean, how could you work for a man who sounds like that? He just sounds so evil.
Task before we join you. This magic we harness will transform the world.
The voice actor did a great job. I would have liked some more morally grey villains, because these guys were just like evil incarnate, like I just want to destroy everything and I'm blighted and rah. And I would have liked to have seen a bit more morally grey and morally ambiguous things there, and that kind of runs throughout the entire game, but I'm going to touch more on that in a minute. However, the third villain you all know is Solus, who the game was based on, but they kind of shifted away and moved towards the Veilguard, and I think they did him really well. He is sympathetic, but manipulative and also cunning. He feels like the Dreadwolf. You can never quite tell if he's being trustworthy, if he's trying to help you, or if he's just trying to manipulate you and get what he wants. And I was never truly sure if he was an ally or a villain, and I think that was really important for his story. I love the dynamic between Solus and Rook, and I think that I would have loved to have seen more of it. It wasn't there as much as I thought it would be, and as much as I would have hoped. He had moments to shine, and they resolved his story well. His story does get resolved here. They say that in the opening game, that this is his conclusion, and no matter what happens, this is going to be the end of his story, and I definitely feel they did that well. I don't see him coming back in any way, besides references and being talked about. But that's a big tick for me, I think. I think this was the game to do it, and I was never the big Solus lover that so many other members of the community are. I romance Blackwall. But yeah, Solus, they did him phenomenally here. I have nothing but good things to say, really. Apart from I wanted more. But, so they're the main villains. What about the others? Mainly the Venatori, the Antam, and the Darkspawn, the villains that populate the game from day to day, the ones who are going to be taking you through every combat, going to be motivating you, attacking you at every corner. Well, they're terrible. They're really, really bad. They are very generic, and I never want to see the Venatori ever again. They were just bland. They lacked any clear motivation. Why the Venatori were helping the Elven Gods, I still don't know. What do they get out of it? Power, kind of? That's just boring. What a boring motivation. The Darkspawn are just crazy, weird eating things that just, like, you know, they're just mindless husks, pretty much, so they're pretty boring. They were a lot cooler. We still haven't seen anything happen from the Dragon Age Awakening characters, the Architect, like the Talking Darkspawn, the Awakened. We still haven't spoken about any of them. And overall, like the Antam as well, we got one scene with their leader, and then he went all blighted, and that was it. Like, what? Come on, we can be a bit more creative, BioWare, with our main villains. I get it, and there's just not enough variety there. It made zero sense for these three groups to come together and be on the same side, to be aligned in any way. They're not. They don't interact. They don't talk. Besides being on the same island at the same time, and there was no significant payoff for their presence. Like in Inquisition, you at least had Calpurnia, who was supposed to be a companion in this game, by the way. Crazy. She is in the comics, so makes sense. But yeah, there's no payoff. There's no leaders to kill. It's just they're there as cannon fodder, and I think that was just so pointless. And on the trend of things that piss me off in this game, and I'm sorry, this is a negative section. Developers, do not take it personally. You're probably not watching this, but please don't. The returning characters. I unfortunately disliked every single returning character in this game besides Varric and Solus. They stripped each and every one of them of many of their key personality traits because they can't remember anything from their journeys besides one reference where they're like, oh, I travelled with blah blah blah. Try not to spoil, but you know who they are, right? And considering they said they didn't want any returning characters to be just cameos that come up, that's what they felt like. Some of them were faction leaders, but they didn't do much more than narrate combat and have a conversation about nothing they've been through. You never get to ask questions to any of them or explore that like you did with Hawk in Inquisition, or Alistair or Loghain. You never get to ask them questions and explore their lives, which is we'll talk about that in a minute. Anyway, focus on this. I was ultimately left disappointed with each and every one, and I surprisingly surprised myself when I said this. I wish they weren't in the game, because they just left a sour taste in my mouth, and they should have just let me move on with my life, you know? And they also there was characters that if these guys were included, these two should have been as well, and I'm gonna say it, so spoiler warning, skip ahead 20 seconds if you don't want to hear it. The fact that Fenris wasn't in the game is mental. And Zevran as well. Those two make kind of zero sense not to be in the game. Zevran's a little bit more believable because he's not really with the Crows anymore. That's a lie, actually. In 2, the last time we see him, he is with the Crows, and also, no, he is with the Crows, so he should have been in the game. And also, like I said, Fenris, he's in the comics, he's in Tevinter. It makes zero sense for him to be doing anything else but being in Dogtown, and I think it was a huge waste, them not being in it. So the video game returning characters, alright, I was always going to be negative about that, so let's move on. The returning characters from the books and comics are all incredible. They did The Last Flight and Tevinter Nights complete justice, and I was left feeling satisfied and glad that I'd read them. I was like, this has added something to my experience. I am actively enjoying this quest more because I've read this book, mainly Davrin's companion quest. And I urge you to all go and read the books. They're great, in my opinion. Last Flight and Tevinter Nights especially, really great reads, and if you've played Veilguard and you enjoy it, you're going to really enjoy that, as you see kind of iconic characters in their kind of prime. They're getting stories that are based on them with no other major life events, and I really enjoyed that. We saw Taya, Viago, Evka, and Antoine. Just to name a few, there was definitely more. I know Strife, and they're all just iconic, and I love them all, and yeah, so well done, BioWare. See, let down on the returning characters from the games, but when you don't have to follow a canon, that anyone but you has written. You do a great job. So, speaking of Evka, Antuin, Teo, and Viago, factions. Big part of this game as well. You pick a faction in your character creator, and you get a backstory from that. I didn't love the backstories, to be honest, because they kind of shoehorn you into this character, but we'll talk more about Rook in a bit later. But the faction choices, they were unique and well fleshed out in the world. However, there was not enough integration into said world. So they're fleshed out, and they get lots of background, and you hear a lot about them, how they're made up, and you don't really associate with any of that in the game. You don't see that come to life. You don't really interact with anyone, especially in the Lords of Fortune, besides merchants and the faction leaders. Unless you're a Grey Warden, then you see a little bit two more characters, just because Grey Wardens are always integral to the plot. And until the end, you never really cooperate with any of them, and you don't explore the hierarchy at all, which is a shame. Really, there's a few side quests where you do that a little bit, but it's few and far between. Like, there's a whole 9 Talons of the Crows, and you meet 3 of them. Like, come on. That's not fair, because no, they all do exist. They're all just nameless. So that feels like a huge waste. Your faction selection doesn't really affect enough dialogue to matter. It does affect some, but not in a meaningful way where I was like, wow, I'm really glad I chose to be a crow. I'm getting so much more insight into, like, assassinations and things like that. You get, like, 1 or 2 little bits of dialogue here and there, and it's really dumb dialogue. Like, in the final scene, you're leading your final charge, and I could go, "For the crows!" And I was like, why would I say that in the moment? We've got everyone behind me. That makes no sense. And it's just moments like that I'm like, in the context of the conversation, it makes no sense for me suddenly to be like, oh yeah, I'm a crow. So, that being said, Crows, Mournwatch, and Veiljumpers really captured my interest. They were unique and interesting, their motives and cultures were really cool, and they each feed into the culture and world of Phaedas in a meaningful way. So, yeah, I would love to see them expanded more. However, the Lords of Fortune, Grey Wardens, and Shadow Dragons really felt quite bland and tropey to me. Grey Wardens are obviously instrumental to the story, and that's why I'm playing a Grey Warden in my second playthrough. I know it seems a bit hypocritical to say that and then that, but exactly the same time as before, we've seen the Grey Wardens. They're exactly the same as the previous games, right? They're massively flawed, with assholes leading the faction. Until Evka and Antuin, don't get me wrong, until then, it's the same old story with Grey Wardens. They never seem to fix their shit. And it makes Davrin's choice in his quest line glaringly obvious, in my opinion. But with every faction, there is one consistency. No matter which you choose, you will always be playing Rook. And he is the most important member of not just Veilguard, but the entire game. He's your player character. And overall, I like them. They're witty, charismatic, and they're a born leader. They care about their team, they want to help, they care about the world, they want to do things. They're not free agents, but because you're controlling them, but like, you do have that kind of free will, and you're a character, right? Like, I think he's like Marmite, or in my case a he, but you're either gonna love him or you're gonna hate him, and that's just how this kind of character goes. I really enjoyed it because I like that kind of humor, I like that kind of character, so it worked for me. But there are definitely going to be people out there who do not like Rook and find him cringy and annoying, and that's just unfortunately how sometimes this goes. We can't all be like the Inquisitor. I think they fit into the story really well, and they definitely reside in Phaedas. They don't ask stupid questions that your character would just know, and you're asking it. Like, you're not going to be like, who's Mefal as an elf, which is great. Like an Inquisition, you're an Dalish elf asking like about old elven gods. I'm like, you were raised on stories like this, and characters always respond like, you don't know this, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't. Or I just ask it to get more dialogue. Whereas now you're kind of forced to go into the codex if you want to learn more, or kind of find other means. And I like that way of storytelling. I think it encourages you to learn about the world in your own way, but let the story. You're playing a character. You're role playing, right? Like, you're gonna know stuff about the world. You've got to put the effort in to find it, and for me, I like that. Like, that's what a codex should be, that's what it's for, and so I enjoyed exploring the world as Rook. And for me, he does win out over the Inquisitor, but he isn't close to Hawk or the Hero Ferelden, in my opinion. And it was a problem for me because he is morally good through and through. You cannot be an asshole in any way. There's barely any variation in the dialogue choices. Witty isn't really always witty. I was talking to Ellis about this, one of my friends, where it'll be like the joke mask, and I'll be like, oh, that's like the best option, but I don't really want to seem jokey in this setting. And then I'll be like, it's the best option. I'll pick it, and what he says just isn't funny in any way, shape, or form. Good. I was like, fine, but that's not a witty remark. You're just saying the neutral cause. And I think there wasn't enough variation in those options. And aggressive, you just kind of cut the conversation short. You don't respond like angrily. You just go, eh. And I was like, that's not what aggressive means. So I think they really need to rework the dialogue system, but we're going to talk on that. So I would have loved to have seen more morally neutral or morally bad choices, but yeah, you win some, you lose some. Alright, so we're going on to the story now, and the story is split up into 3 acts. So starting with Act 1, it's strong. It has difficult choices, city versus city, it's spaced out companion recruitment like in Mass Effect 2, which I really liked, so you can't just sprint to collect your favourites, you have to explore with different people, get to know them, it feels like you're progressing through the world, it makes sense, it's logical, I liked it, it paces it well, and you have interesting dynamics with each of your team coming together, and they're such a bunch of misfits that they're never all going to get along, and that's explored, and I like that. And I was left intrigued and excited about all of their companion missions. I was like, this artwork with Varric kind of talking about it is awesome, and I want to see more of that. It's very Dragon Age 2-esque, and it makes perfect sense for Varric delivering it until the end. But there's also this layer of confusion as to what the consequences are going to be of my decisions, which is good, because that's what you want. You want to be making decisions going, God, what the ramifications going to be like that. So overall, I enjoyed Act 1. I had a really good time with it. I didn't love the first few missions, but after that I was into it, and yeah, I wanted to play more, keep going, which is what Act 1 needs to do. Well, then Act 2. Consequences are revealed in Act 2, which sees you finishing up all your companion quests. I know we're already there. And trying your hardest to uncover the gods' plans, whatever that might be. It involves Red Lyrium, surprise, and it involves Elven artifacts, surprise, it's Dragon Age, of course it does, and of course, blood magic comes in some ways. And for me, this is the weakest part of the game. I didn't love it, just because huge built-up characters, such as the Dragon King and Hezenkos, from all the companion missions, are just wrapped up like super quickly in really lackluster boss fights. We're going to talk more about that later. I know there's a lot of that, but I'm trying to do this in some kind of order, so please bear with me. The conversations and relationship building, though, is great, and I really felt this group became a found family, and I liked that. I thought it was great. Romances made sense. You're kind of exploring that together, and going on this huge journey, and I think that really did a lot for the companions, and it made it feel, special, that bond. And the main quests are good in this act as well. They don't just feel like additions to the world, they feel like things are happening in these main missions. They're important. There's few and far between, but when you go on it, you're like, shit, things could go wrong here. I need to be like alert, ready, making decisions quickly and deciding, and I really enjoyed the stakes of them. And I think this act is just the most fluctuating in kind of quality, because there are some, I'd say 5 out of 10 missions, but there's also some 9/10s, right? I loved some parts of it, Balara's questline, things like that, but I didn't love some of the other missions, side quests especially. Some of them were quite boring and bland and repetitive. The Mornwatch quest especially was just you just go kill things and then go back, and I was like, they could have been so much more creative with this. The Formless one, though, iconic, best, easily the best boss fight in the game, and easily the most fun villain that you have going into it. So side quest wise, look out for the Formless one. He's a lot of fun. I am going to speak about the companion missions here just because it makes sense. Davrin's, for me, was a delight. I really enjoyed this one. The Griffins and the Gloom Howler are really interesting and just cool villains, and I really wanted to explore more and more, and I was looking forward to that questline, which is interesting because he wasn't one of my favourite companions, but his questline is definitely up there in the list. Balara's started really strong and kind of got quite basic. We don't see enough exploration of the main antagonist, Naris, and some of the revelations aren't properly explored, really, and we don't feel the emotional weight, or I didn't at least, which is strange because in her first like Act 1 quests it made me emotional, and yet the payoff didn't happen at the end, which was a shame. Lucanus's is strong throughout but felt very short. I think it's just because the first one you wrap up, and it's also really predictable. You can tell what's going to happen from, I think, one of the second conversations, or the second mission. You're like, oh, that's going to happen. Okay, that's where they're going with it. Fine. It was just fine. Nev's is ridiculously uncreative and bland. Like her, I guess, really. I know there's a lot of Nev lovers out there. I know because you're #1 romance. But it was like what you find and hunt the Venatori and a blood mage. Alright, you pop some crystals in a boss fight and then it's over. So I didn't love that one. We didn't get enough detecting. There wasn't like a mystery to solve. It was just someone who used to be in Nev's past and has come back. Ooh, so didn't love that one. Emmerich's is fine. I think it's the most interesting of the actual end quest character choices, and left me actually thinking about it. I was like, what do I want him to do and what do I feel? But the villain was subpar and was just there as a plot device, really. Again, it's kind of same with all of them. Just And Harding's also starts off really intriguing and then ends up quite underwhelming, considering the implications of her quest as the first dwarf with magic. Or only living dwarf with magic. It's just not really explored, and I don't know. It just felt like a bit of a waste. I hope they explore it further, but they might not, because things can happen in this game, and that has massive ramifications. So, yeah, I don't know if they're going to explore that again. But yeah, going on to Tash's. Now, for me, it's a hard one because it feels quite intrusive. And for the record, the inclusivity part of the game is great. I'm so glad that non-binary representation features in this game. I think it's great, and I think they should do this more, but in a different way. I'm not non-binary, so I can't comment on how non-binary people feel about this quest, and if you guys all love it, then I'm wrong, alright? And I will hold my hands up and say I am not qualified to speak on this, but for me, it just feels quite intrusive, and it feels like they are making Tash's character all about being non-binary and not being a really cool character first and then being non-binary, if that makes sense. Like, Krem in Inquisition is a really interesting character first with a lot of story and interesting things to say, and trans person second, but that can be explored in the game. And I think that is how you do inclusion really well. And I don't know, it feels like Tash is not forced into being a non-binary person, because obviously they want to, but they're forced into that story as their main plot point, which is a shame, because I was really invested in Tash to begin with, and I was still, in the end, it didn't like completely put me off, but I really would have loved to have seen more, like, they have dragon blood, right? And that is barely explored, because they are non-binary. And I was just like, come on, like, this can be a thing. This is a great thing to explore in conversation quests, but it can't be their only motivation, right? And it's all about who their identity is, and it's really weird how Rook has so much influence into this as well. I'm like, it just didn't really make sense to me, and it didn't land with me, is what I'm trying to say. If it landed with everyone else, fair enough. But, moving on, we go on to Act 3. And this was arguably my favourite part of the game. Not even arguably, this was my favourite part of the game. It's emotional, impactful, and conclusive. The three things you want from a conclusion. It does everything a conclusion should do. Everything counts for something, and you witness everyone play their role in some way. Not one character... some of the returning characters, but not one main character moment misses a moment to shine. Everyone gets at least one, and it wraps everything up in an awesome final section, and I was hooked for most of it, and very happy with the result. However, my only gripe is a major loss happens in Act 3 that is unavoidable. It cannot be changed, and it cannot be avoided in any way, and makes some of the development over the game irrelevant, with no hints that the choice you make will carry the consequences it does, in my opinion. I wasn't a fan of this being mixed in with the other biggest character revelation of the game as well. There's kind of 3 that happen in a very short space of time. A lot of emotional weight to them, and it just didn't help pay this off, you know. If you played the game, if you know, you know what I was doing there. But it just didn't help that pay off being mixed with 2 other things as well. So, yeah, I was a little bummed about that, because you put all this effort into completing quests and sorting things out, and just some stuff is unavoidable, and some choices that do not seem like they would have a huge impact just have the biggest impact in the entire game. And that felt like a shame. So, but overall, Act 3 is really good. Until the endings of this game. Not the Solus endings, they're great. The endings of this game are atrocious. It's terrible. Some of the worst I think BioWare have ever done. And I'm not kidding. I was laughing at it. My chat was laughing at it. And it was like a school play. Each companion says a line of dialogue to wrap up their arcs. And when I say wrap up, they just summarize what you've done throughout the game in one line. And it makes 0 sense. No one gets any unique slides about what they do post Veilguard. It's just, you just learn nothing. You're just left with nothing. There's one cool moment in that entire ending pack. I just think it's disgraceful, in my opinion. I was stunned at how basic and how poor it was, considering everything else in the game. I'm sorry, that was fucking terrible. What was that? It left a really sour taste in my mouth and gave me no excitement for the next games or next moments or where the characters are going to go, because yeah, it was crap, and it was really left it single-handedly took away from that entire last section, which was also the secret end of the game is also just a terrible idea and makes no sense, and please don't do it. All I will say is I feel like the writers of this game despise Origins and 2 and are just doing all they can to make sure that those games are as pointless as possible. I'm sorry for the rant there, but it was just not what I expect from this franchise or from BioWare in general. It's the worst ending of a Dragon Age by a country mile, and I would have rather it faded to an end to black in the final scene of the game than have that slideshow. And I usually love the slideshows. Alright, going on to dialogue now, and for the most part, the dialogue was strong. It's well delivered. Bellara, Emmerich, Lucanus and Harding each deliver impressive performances. And my Rook also sounded realistic and emotive in the right moments. I was happy with it. The only companion whose voice acting I would criticise is Nev. I felt she didn't deliver and was quite bland, as you can probably get that from my review. Writing-wise, I was also overall happy. Dialogue was interesting, humorous, and smart for the most part. I think I could tell the companions apart based on some of their written lines. Bellara especially was really well done, and as I said earlier, it moved me to tears in Act 1 with her story. So, yeah, can't ask for much more than... Villains were also sinister and interesting in their dialogue, although their motives and characters themselves were sometimes bland. The writing was strong for most of them, and that was enough for me, to be honest. But however, this is a Dragon Age, and anyone who isn't expecting a bit of cringe and there's plenty of cringe lines, and I never want to hear the words ancient elven gods Gillenade and Elganon, spirits or Darkspawn ever again. They're said so much in this game, or Blight actually. Blight is also said probably more than Origins, which is the whole basis of that game, and also. Many of the NPCs aren't great either, especially well written. The Inquisitor especially was incredibly bland. I said that a lot. Some of this game is just bland. Powder!
It isn't just Inquisitor, is it? You were someone before that.
Clan Llewellyn. We try to be no one you've heard of. Morrigan is holding a perimeter. We're alone.
Tell me what Solus did at Elganon's ritual.
Sounds like you already know.
I need to hear it from you.
Elganon raised his archdemon. Solus got us out of there. We saved a lot of people.
You sound grateful.
Why not? He really did help.
It seems so. He's always thinking about where it ends. How many of his names do you know? God of Lies, Dreadwolf, Fen'Harel. They're titles he earned from enemies, followers, and fractured history. I once called him by another name. Friend.
Some friend.
Do you always agree with your friends?
No.
We are pretty aligned on whether or not to destroy the world, if that's what you mean.
I'll never excuse what he's done. He's killed people I held dear, you know this too.
But
He became those names when he fought gods.
Who?
And regret for his world turned into destroying ours. Sound familiar?
you're making us sound like Solus. That's uncomfortable.
We're not like our enemy. They're making us do this.
Simple as one of Varric's morals. Don't become what you hate.
Or trapped by what we've lost. Also one of his. Tell me about the team you've built.
Are they a concern, or...?
You're handling things. This part, what you have now, I just miss the banter about friends.
In fact, all the returning characters are pretty badly written as a rule because they don't have much to work with, so I don't think it's the writer's fault because for some reason... Nope, not going and yeah, it just feels they poured all their time into the companions and then rushed the others, which I guess was their approach to this game, but they had 9 years, so I was expecting a little bit more interesting NPCs because the previous games had tons. Speaking of other NPCs, you can't ask questions or explore this world at all. Like ever. Like, Rook doesn't want to extend any conversation beyond what he absolutely has to. It makes the game feel so much more linear that I can't have these long, in-depth conversations with NPCs like Morrigan. I can barely say a word to about anything she's experienced in her life, other than, who are you? And the dialogue wheel, as I said, just needs to go. The Origins line by line, it was so much better. Just go back to that. Everyone wants you to go back to that. Or at least extend so that when I pick an option, I say what I think I'm going to say, instead of just being off the beaten path and we're getting lost in communication. Then my Rook says something and I'm like, no, I didn't want to say that. That's weird. So I'm sorry. I'm just getting tired of saying the opposite of what I mean. But that's not a Veilguard issue. That's a Dragon Age issue, really. Pacing-wise, I think the pacing was good, the story flows well, and I felt that the game was progressing at a good amount, and I was leveling up in the right ways, and there was just the right amount of side content to keep me invested but not bored, and the main quests were diverse enough that I was always kind of interested and ready for the next one. So yeah, pacing-wise, no complaints here. However, side quests. For me, these were simply fine. Many of them outside of the companion quests just weren't detailed or interesting. They were just go and kill these guys here, or go and clear this location, or go and find him, or find me this thing. Really kind of basic. None of the quest givers offered any real conversation. I can't really remember any of them besides one, which was Flynn from the Grey Wardens, but anyone else I don't remember. Faction quests are also a real letdown. They feel more purposeful because you're getting points from it and you get to chat with faction leaders and kind of get a bit more backstory in the world from them, but for the most part it's just The arena in Lords of the Fortune questline is dreadful, like notably bad. It's just 10 rounds of terrible combat against really easy enemies that took me about 20 minutes, and that was the Lords of Fortune questline was that. The Crows and the Grey Wardens, though, are done quite well with semi-interesting quests and great faction leaders, so I was happy with those. Everyone else. Shadow Dragons, Viper, and Tarquin, I think, they're cool. But I didn't really interact with them much. But I'm sure anyone who saved Minrathous over Treviso, you weirdos, can tell me a bit more about that. Morn Watch, on the other hand, was just an annoying questline. It's a real shame because... with such a cool concept for a quest line, we never explore really that. We never really explore the catacombs, to be honest. And it just culminates in fighting an animated object with a crazy amount of health, which was just a bit weird. and just not what I was kind of hoping for from this. The formless one though, he's a G. He's a great. So the only standout here for me were the Crossroad quests, which are some of the crazy. The end of the Crossroad quest, which culminated in some of the craziest Dragon Age lore drops I've ever seen, and unlocks the secret ending for the game. There is secret ending, the secret Solus ending, not the secret ending. There's a lot of secrets, okay? And unfortunately, that is locked behind the same boss fights as the rest of the game. You can guess it. More on that later. But so it's worth doing, but it's a bit of a slog, especially with this super hard dragon fight that exists, which is just the same as every other dragon fight except with more health. But overall, where the story is concerned, it felt they were desperately avoiding any really uncomfortable situations, and I didn't feel like I could make any hard choices. I definitely feel like illusion of choice was a problem here, which was a shame, because I feel like in Dragon Age that should never be the case, and I felt like that barely any of my choices mattered, and this made the game feel really linear. This is not really like 2 or Origins, because at least there, like, you can change world states based on like each zone's resolution. Here, not really, outside the city versus city choice, especially for Act 1 and 2. This was a major issue for me, and I think this game suffers heavily from it, and I was really kind of, disappointed in that. So, yeah, a bit of a letdown, but the story itself was good, high stakes, and characters populated that story well. Okay, I've talked you to death over the story, so now we're going to go on to the gameplay. Starting with classes, there are 3 classes in Veilguard, each with 3 subclasses and skill trees. I played a rogue Veil Ranger, which optimizes the bow, and you can play a mage, Deathcaller, Evoker, or Spellblade, a rogue Veil Ranger, duelist or saboteur, and then warrior, champion, reaper, or slayer. So there's lots of choice there. And I really enjoyed the feeling of the gameplay, and I think that the class system is the best of all the games by a long way. Each subclass builds on a key class feature, so you have your, like in the rogue, you have the bow, you have your melee, and then you have grenades and kind of contraptions, and each subclass builds on one aspect of that, and I really feel like that works. I think they interestingly offer the most reason to replay, because the gameplay's that fun for me. I've seen some people say it's not fun, but I had a blast with it. So, and you know what, fair play BioWare, you took the critiques of the combat in Inquisition and the other 2 games, and you built on it, and you developed a really cool class system. And I had a great time like honing my character and building the build that I wanted to work on. So, exploration and level design. Instead of the Inquisition's open world and 2's hub worlds, we go back to Origin's level worlds, of which there are several. You explore these areas, finding collectibles and picking up side quests in each region with like a little collectible map, which was really useful for me to kind of complete, and I 100%ed found everything, which was really enjoyable. Still didn't find the secret ending though, which is crazy. And overall I liked this approach. It allowed us to really explore Northern Phaedas instead of being trapped in like Kirkwall, and we see the vast array of cultures that inhabit it. By being smaller, the areas do feel more alive, they're more versatile, there's more to explore, and I felt more compelled to explore as well, instead of just vast areas of empty space. And yeah, I enjoyed that things were unlocked in these areas as I completed story missions and side quests and companion quests, and yeah, it worked great for me. However, on that, we really needed more of Tevinter and Navarra. We didn't really explore that, and what we got just wasn't enough. Docktown being all from Imrathas makes no sense, and Tevinter was so built up in the marketing, we should have explored way more of it. And I also felt there weren't much location-based quests like there were in Inquisition, where you'd go into a region and there'd be kind of like a main quest line overarching that region alongside your main quest line. I would have liked to have seen a bit more of that. We also don't really interact with normal people, besides maybe in the Hossberg Wastes. We mainly just the factions, which feels like a waste because the people of Phaedas go through a lot of hardship, and I like helping them. So I would have liked to see more of those quests. Done interestingly, of course, but that I think would have added a bit. But overall, I felt like the exploration was done well, and I enjoyed stumbling upon new loot and secrets through just traversing the levels. And I think the level design in total, I was happy with it. It's a lot of go here, pop the light bubble, and then move on, but that's fine. I enjoyed doing that. It was quite satisfying. Arlefin especially was really fun to explore with like puzzles and unique ways of kind of interacting with the world, and each kind of had a way for your companions to feed into the level design, and I found that really interesting. So yeah, overall, good job. Going on to difficulty, I can't quite believe I'm going to say this myself as someone who's not a fan of difficult games, but the game is a bit too easy on anything below the difficulty above normal. I can't think of what that is. Admittedly, as I said, I played on normal, but even on the highest difficulty, which I'm currently doing, it's just, there isn't too much challenge. It's difficult, more difficult than normal, obviously, but it's just more health, and just kind of, if you're good at the game, you're good at the game, and that's kind of how it is. I enjoy the custom difficulty slides, which is done well, and I appreciate the versatility of the system. Overall, I think you can make this the difficulty you want, if you wish to, but I like to stick to normal, and I missed out on the challenging parts of the game. But that's my own personal choice. I also killed a level 50 endgame boss on normal at level 25, which says something about the difficulty of the game. Speaking of, the level cap is 50. I do think it fills up a bit too quickly, and by the middle of Act 2 I think I was level 50 from doing all the side quests and exploring and killing things. So I would have liked to seen a bit slower level progression just to make me kind of work a little bit harder, but then I probably would have complained about it being too grindy. So, you know, classic Dragon Age fan, never fully happy. Going on to gear and loot, I think it's done really well for the most part. I really enjoyed the transmog system. You can find a cool outfit and you can stick with that for the entire game, because you can keep that for the entire game, which is great. However, I don't love the look of most of the outfits, unfortunately. But that's, again, personal preference. My end rook ended up looking awesome, and I was really happy with him and wanted to show him off. So we are in. This is terrible lighting for you to see my rook, because I'm very proud of how he looks now. I could have just gone on. This is my rook, the final. He is romancing this lovely lady here, Balara. They are a very cute couple. It was very close between Rook and Harding, but that never happened. Alright, so enchanting and upgrading is non-intrusive and still satisfying. I did it, which says something, because I usually hate crafting and upgrading in games, but you could really improve your gear through this system, where you wouldn't find better things. By upgrading, you really ensured you had the best gear on you, and it felt like a good thing to do to prepare for those harder fights. So I enjoyed that. But having said that, I did, especially in Act 1 and 2, kept changing gear, finding new things. Chests really do matter. You find some of the best loot in there, and I was really, would stumble upon something and be like, that's cool, I want to wear that, or I want to use that. So chests matter, and that's a good thing. However, the unique weapons mostly sucked. Like, they'd have really powerful features, and then huge drawbacks, which for me were just not worth picking them up, compared to like my really good bow, for example. So I would have liked to have seen just really powerful unique weapons with very limited drawbacks. I think that's, you go through a lot to get them, so it makes sense that they're just better, you know? Alright, I promise we're getting towards the end of this, but I really want to kind of comment on bosses and then graphics and soundtrack. The bosses, to be honest, mostly all of them are terrible. Very few unique mechanics besides Isaiah and the Elven Gods. The dragon fights they've even made dragons boring in this game. They're worse than Inquisition. They're all kind of the same, and they all feel just fine. The Formless one, though, once again, he's a big op, in a good way, and like his fight was legitimately quite hard. One of the hardest difficulty spikes in the game, but I really enjoyed I enjoyed working my way through it, and I would have liked to have seen more kind of approaches like that. The biggest disappointment in bosses were the crossroad bosses and champions. They're just spongier main enemies. Not much effort or time was put into making them cool or special, especially because some of them, if you noticed, one of them is like Solus's right-hand man, who we've seen before, and he's just another bad undead dude, and I was like, that sucks. felt really unsatisfying and just a bit of a letdown. And yeah, when fighting bosses, I was rarely happy. But I'm going to try and stick positive, and overall the gameplay receives the Most Improved award. Okay, graphics and soundtrack. The graphics are stunning. I mean, you've probably heard this in every review. Every aesthetic matches the culture and world. Ravane is exactly as I pictured. Treviso is gorgeous and interesting. I'm less of a fan of Hosberg, Minrathous and Navarra, but that's just personal preference. There's still a lot of effort that's gone in there, and you can really see the efforts in every single small detail in every single vista. So, BioWare, I have no complaints. You've delivered an exceptional world to explore graphically, and I loved every second of looking at it. The character creator is also easily the best in Dragon Age. Different lightings, incredible hair physics, like, incredible. I want this in every game going forward. The hair looked great, which is a weird thing to fixate on, but and there were so many sliders, which is what you want from a character creator. So, overall, I left the character creator feeling impressed and happy. The enemy's design. The worst part of the graphics, we've already touched on this. The Venatori look bland, demons look fine, I guess, and Darkspawn look goofy. Variety in designs was definitely needed. It's definitely a missed opportunity. Do better next time. Apart from the Antam, they look cool, and they were very fearsome. Didn't like them as enemies, story-wise, but they looked cool, so... You win some, you lose some, but I'm not going to dwell on that too much. You guys know. BioWare know. The soundtrack, though, done by Hans Zimmer, was beautiful. It's on par with the other Dragon Ages, and I enjoyed hearing many of the songs that Hans Zimmer delivered, and I would... as you can tell, I'm not overly qualified in gameplay, graphics, or soundtrack, so I spent a lot less time on that than I did on story, so I hope you'll begrudge me that, but story's what I'm really interested in. But in conclusion, this game did exceed many expectations, and although I was nervous, I had fun, and when you're playing a video game, that's the most important thing. I enjoyed my playthrough, I enjoyed the characters, and I enjoyed the world. This is a great game. However, to answer the question posed in the initial part of the video, I don't think it's a strong Dragon Age game, unfortunately. The illusion of choice and the lack of past choice inclusion, having only 3 coming in from across the past 3 games, none from Origins, none from 2, severely hinders it for me past kind of where I can look over. It's an absolutely crazy and mind-boggling decision for Dragon Age that makes no sense. For me, it was lazy, BioWare, and it was a real uppercut for the fans, especially for me. I saw it and I just haven't been able to get over it. I've got to give it a rating. I'd say this game does lose points for the lazy handling of the IP and the illusion of choice, but it also loses points for repetitive bosses, poor quest design in some cases, the terrible ending slideshow, and a lack of dialogue expansion. You just kind of... You play Rook, you kind of have the option to choose what he says, but not really. But the combat is fun and fluid, companions are on the most part really interesting, dynamic and enjoyable, and the world is impressive. It is Thedas, and, you know, culturally and graphically, it's a joy to explore. We are back in Thedas, and we are back in this franchise, and so my review's a hard one. I think I've got to go with a 6 out of 10. I think it is slightly above average in the grand scheme of things, but that's as a Dragon Age game. I think if you're rating it as a normal game, it's a 7 out of 10. So interestingly, being part of the IP hurt it here, and definitely takes away from a fan's experience. However, there are significant things that I enjoyed about it that take it away from that total middle ground. But overall, I'd say the experience for me was a 6 out of 10. So, what's next for Dragon Age? They've already set it up with Dragon Age 5. They've already set up Dragon Age 5 with a secret ending, and to be honest, I know I touched on this earlier, I hate it. They're messing with things that shouldn't mess with. I think we will see Dragon Age 5, but only time will tell if they learn from their mistakes or if they double down on the path they've chosen on. For now, our eyes turn away from Thedas and up to space. Mass Effect 5, I look forward to meeting you soon. Okay, so that about does it for this review. Thank you very much for sticking with me on this a lot longer ride than I'm sure you would expect from a review, but this is my first one, and I love talking about these sorts of things. and B, I had so many thoughts on this one. The Life is Strange one will be shorter, that is next for reviews, but I also wanted to offer a thank you. Developers, video game developers, have one of the toughest jobs. They have to pour their heart and soul into games for us to enjoy, and stories for us to explore. And often we judge them harshly. And I think this review is quite harsh in cases. So thank you to all the developers who worked on this game. There was some tough love in this review, but I wanted to say I appreciate you, and everything you do for gaming. None of the criticism is a personal attack on any developer, and I know I definitely could not do a better job than the people who worked in BioWare and worked on this game. They did the best that they could, and I know they put everything they had into it. Is there some lazy decisions? Yes. Do I think an individual developer made that? Not at all. And I think anyone who directs any form of hatred or internet trolling or any form of insult towards any developer is not a real part of the gaming community, at least where I'm concerned. Like, you guys do a phenomenal job, and I thank you for the 60 hours I spent with this game very happily. So yeah, I do not feel like I wasted my money, and you guys do a phenomenal job and work such long hours, so thank you. And I felt like that was important to get through. However, having said that, I'm now going to log off as well, and thank you all for watching. If you did enjoy this review, please do hit like as I go through this early stage of reviews, find my review style, find what works, find what people like, dislike. I'm going to be changing a lot, so please comment your thoughts below, whether it's on what I've said, how I've edited, how I've presented, anything you have to say, any feedback is really appreciated, positive or constructive. If you really did enjoy it and want to see more, please hit subscribe. I do want to do more Dragon Age videos because I love this franchise. If you've got any ideas for what you'd love to see from me, please put it down below. I am a bit of a nerd on this thing, as I said, I've read all the books. There's a lot that we could explore together, so please do let me know your thoughts and feelings. And the highest honour that you could bestow upon me is, if you really did love it, share it with your friends. Get them talking about it. Let's encourage a bit of discussion. It's starting to fade away, and I don't think I'm ready for that yet. So let's bring it back. Let's ignite a new conversation. And next, we're back to D&D in exploring Works Varus, my God of Hell. Back to Gods. Classic. Had to be a Dragon Age video where I announced that. So I will see you next week for that video. Thank you all for watching. Have a wonderful night. And remember, Thedas is a very dangerous world.